with Potomac Beads. Join me in making these Noel earrings, which are really cute little wreaths featuring some brick stitch as well as some simple netting. If you need any materials, check out the links below to shop with us online. So to begin the Noel earrings, you're going to want a frame. I'm using a square frame here that is about 16 millimeter. You can also do the exact same thing with a 15 millimeter frame as well. Just the number of brick stitch will be switched on the frame depending on the size of it. I have some 11/0 delicas here in the lined emerald luster and some 3 millimeter beads in the bicones in the crimson opaque. I have 0.006 wildfire beading thread in the green color, and I'm going to tie that about 3 feet onto my loop of my square. I'm tying one loop and then on with another. From here, I'm going to take my needle and thread, which you can use a size 10 or a size 12 needle, up to you, and I'm going to add 2 beads onto my needle. The frame is going to have 5 beads wide with my brick stitch. Now normally when you do brick stitch, you're always going to start out here with 2 beads at a time. I'm going to sew under my frame, holding my beads kind of to the exterior there. And then I'm going to sew back up through bead number 2 toward bead number 1. From here, I'm going to continue with 1 bead at a time. 1 bead goes on. I let that fall down on my thread next to my frame, sew through the frame, and then as you bring your thread through, you're going to sew back up through bead number 3 toward bead number 2. Give a nice tight pull, pulling the thread and not the needle, and have that sit right next to the previous bead. I'm going to put 2 more beads on, and then we're going to turn the corner. When I turn the corner, that's where I'm going to go ahead and use my 3 millimeter bicone. Now, if you have a smaller or a larger frame, your count may be a little bit different as you work around the exterior. What you're going to want to do, based on your exterior frame, is just line it up and see how it sits. I have 5 beads now on my exterior of my frame in my brick stitch. I'm actually going to push those all towards the interior now, and from now on I'll work kind of in the inside. It's usually easiest for brick stitch to work on the exterior, and that's why I was working on that exterior. From here, to do the corners, I'm going to add 1 of my 3 millimeter bicones. Pick up my next one of my Delica beads, let that fall next to the bicone in the interior of the ring, and then we're going to continue our brick stitch around the top of the frame there to the back, and then through that Delica toward the bicone. Go ahead then and pull that. Add another bead. And it just looks a little bit different because it's towards the interior, but it's the exact same thing. Let that bead lay up over top of the frame, take your needle underneath, and sew back up through the bead, right like that. I'm going to continue now wrapping and doing all of my corners until I have 5 beads on my 5 beads on my brick stitch. Then I add a bead and another Delica. Do your 5 beads on, another bicone, another Delica. So I'm going to go around here getting that first starter set. And I would recommend, I forgot to say this, some 0.006 wildfire beading thread in the green color. It adds to that look of that Noel holiday cheer wreath look that we're getting. For our second step, what we're going to do is connect the sides and then go in and create another row of our wreath. So from here, I have my last 4 millimeter bicone and then that first Delica bead there. I'm going to take my thread and needle up through Delica bead number 1, wrap around the form through to the bottom, so I'm kind of tucking right underneath the form there, and doing brick stitch going right back up through bead number 1. This also gets bead number 1 to sit really nicely along that exterior row. From here, we're going to go back through that last bicone and exit. When I'm through the last bicone, here is step number 3. So step number 3, we're going to go in and add 3 of our seed beads, go back through our bicone. So I'm coming out of the top of that bicone, I'm adding 3 seed beads and sewing back through that same bicone. Let your thread kind of push those beads towards the top of the bead, towards the interior. From here, add 4 more of your Delica beads and repeat. Back through the bicone, coming out of the bicone, we repeat that same step. Add 3 beads and go back through that same bicone. Once you exit the bicone then, you're going to go back and add 4 more beads. Through the next bicone, and so forth. 2 are done there, and I have 3 more to go. The last thing I'm going to do is go back through those 3, after those 4 beads, go through my bicone again and hang out. After you complete this step then, and go through that bicone, we're going to turn our thread and go back through those 3 beads that cap our 3mm bicone. So I'm going to go back through those beads that sit right above the bicone, all 3, and bring my thread and needle out. Give a nice little tight yank to tighten those up all. And then we're going to go back through all 3 of those beads, and you can see that one's turned towards the back, just push it towards the front. We're going to add 1 more Delica and then sew back through all 3 of those arched beads sitting above my bicone. Again here then, add 1 bead, sew back through all 3 beads that sit above the bicone. Again, 1 bead, back through all 3 beads. And as you go back through all 3 beads, you might need to do 2 and then just catch on to the last one. Sometimes you can sew through all 3, sometimes it's just 2 at a time. And you'll notice I have a lot of thread here. It's because I have enough thread. I've already threaded my needle once. I'm ready to go for my next earring. Add 1 more bead and then back through those first 3. Once I go back through those first 3, that interior of my leaf is complete, and I'm going to step back up through my bicone towards my outer edge. After coming out through my bicone, I'm going to sew through the last one of my delicas that I did with the brick stitch. You can tell you're at the last one because the double line here would be the first one. We're going to sew towards the top of the piece in order to add our bow. To add our bow, we're going to start with our brick stitch on that top, and I have 2 of my delicas on again because it's basically like starting a new row of brick stitch. I'm going to tuck under my form, sewing towards the top, and then I'm going to sew back through bead number 2 toward bead number 1. There I have it. From here, I want you to add on 1 4mm bead, 1 of your bows here, 1 of your delicas, and a wire guard. The wire guard just makes a nice finished polished look as you're going up to the top of the earring. From here then, we're going to come down through the wire guard to the other side. Add 1 more of your delicas and come back down through the bow as well as through the 3mm bead. From here, we're going to add another 1 of our delicas, and this time we're going to go to the opposite corner, to the other side basically of our form. through my form, continuing my brick stitch, and then back through my seed bead toward my bicone. And see, then when you pull that nice and tight, you want the bicone to sit right in the middle. Add one more of your Delica beads, go back through the form, and brick stitch that one on. So I'm going back towards that same bead right there. And you can see now that it's been brick stitched. Get that tail out of the way. 2 beads to one side of the top and 1 bead to the other side of the top. From here, I'm going to reinforce the piece. So I'm going to go back through bead number 3, coming out of bead number 4 at the top there of the brick stitch, through my form. I'm going to flip it over because it's a little bit easier to see then. Back up through bead number 3. When I exit bead number 3, I'm going back into my 3mm bead, back up through my Delica. So literally you're just going backwards. So the exact same thing that you just did, but you're going the opposite direction. Not adding any beads. I'm going to go up through the side right here. Down the wire guard on the opposite side, back down through the Delica, and down through the hole, as well as the bicone. Make sure that the thread sits right there in that wire guard, and then you're going to come down through Delica bead number 2. Push that guy over a little bit here. Wrap underneath the form. Going around here, back up through bead number 2, and then down through bead number 1. When I come down through bead number 1, I'm going to sew down through that first Delica right after, through my 3mm crystal, back through my 11/0 on the other side of the crystal of the brick stitch, and then to pull that center over to the side, up through my final bead at the top. So this pulls this through that bead at the top there and brings that down to center so that the middle is going to sit identical on the side. I'm going to bring that over to the side just a tiny little bit, pulling that over, and then tying my 2 thread ends together. Because it is green, you're not going to see it a ton. What I would recommend is you can also go back down through your second Delica there, so you can bring the thread towards the back. And as you bring your thread through that second Delica, you can tuck your thread and needle underneath what would be the bridge thread that sits below the Delicas there. Now, if you're not too worried about your top sitting exactly straight like I am, you could have, if you wanted to, tied it when you got to one end rather than reinforcing. Once I get that over to the side then, I'm going to take my 2 thread ends. The one is already knotted from the original circle of the brick stitch, and I'm going to knot the end of my thread to that original knot. Once you're done with that, you have your Noel earring finished. And what I try to always make sure to do is to bring that knot toward the back of the project. So here's my earring. I have the knot right there on the back, and my earring shows then to the front. And I have that knot along the back outer edge. You simply open your ear wire then, slip on the wire guard, and your Noel earrings are all finished. As always, thanks for joining me in making this cute pair of Noel earrings. Remember, if you do need any of the supplies, check out the links below to shop with us online. Also, if you haven't yet, check out the Best Bead Box subscription. You would have already gotten some of these materials in some of the previous month to design this awesome pair of festive earrings. As always, you can also give a little thumbs up, comment below and say any changes, questions, color additions, or design ideas that you have which help to further and better this beading community. As always, thank you so much for watching. Happy holidays and enjoy your Noel earrings.